right. All right. Good evening. Welcome to the September 10th meeting, the Town of Danvers Conservation Commission. We operate under Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, the Wetlands Protection Act, and Chapter 26 of the Town of Danvers General Bylaw, the Wetlands Protection Bylaw. After the applicant presents his or her request and the board has had time to ask questions and discuss the project, we will accept questions. Because we're operating through the COVID-19 pandemic, there's some special rules regarding that, and I will read that. I just would state that if you disagree on any of the issues, that's fine. Just be civil and act in a civil manner. Having said that, I'm going to read the script for the remotely conducted open meeting. We'll start with members. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. And I'll start now. Vanessa Curran.
Present.
All right, thank you. Michael Spillane, I'm here. Ann McGill.
Here, thank you.
Okay, fine. Chelsea King.
I'm here.
Oh, hi, Chelsea.
Hi.
Ken Wally. Ken Wally.
Hi, this is Ellen Gould.
All right, yeah. Yes, Ellen.
Am I on the right call for the Danvers Conservation?
Yes, you are. Yeah. So
Okay.
just stay. Hold on. I'm going to call Joe O'Donnell if present. No. Okay. Well, we do have a quorum. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative.
Mike, excuse me for 1 second.
Yeah, Peter. Oh, sorry, Peter. I missed you. How you doing?
Peter's here. Peter's doing
All
well.
right.
Thank you.
Good, good. You look good. Peter. Peter Wilson.
Present.
Present. Very good. You know, I'm laughing. I don't see you on the list there. Staff, when I call your name, please respond. Judge Appendix. There's some delay here. Judge, are you there?
I am here and present.
All right, good. David Fields.
I'm here.
Now I hear you guys. Alicia Linehan.
Present.
All right, good. And now, speakers, is Dan Nietzsche there from the Beverly Airport? No? Dan Nietzsche?
Yeah, this is Craig Schuster, Airport Solutions Group. I'm here. Dan may be late, but we can still proceed.
All right, that's fine. What's your name again?
Craig Schuster, Airport Solutions Group. And I think
Thank you.
Leon might be on as well, Airport Manager.
I am.
All right. Well, okay, you want to identify yourself?
Gloria Bland, Beverly Airport Manager.
Oh, yes. Hi, Gloria. Thank you. Yeah, Jim Mears? You there, Jim? Is Jim Mears there?
Present.
Okay. All right. And the last would be John Ship from 152 Endicott.
Yes, this is John Shipe, and also with us tonight is Ann Martin, who will be speaking. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. All right, let's do the introduction now. All right, everyone can hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, good, good. All right, good evening. This open meeting of the Danvers Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020. Due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth, due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we've been advised, directed to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in publicly accessible physical locations. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This order can be found posted on the town's website and allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. I'll continue reading this. Sorry it takes so long, but ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Conservation Commission is convening remotely via the WebEx app as posted on the town's website, which identifies how the public may join in. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Supporting materials have been provided. Members of this body will be shown during this transmission. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. So let's turn to the first item on the agenda. Let's just cover some ground rules. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remark, we'll get down the line of members, inviting them by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until I call your name. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps to generate accurate minute taking. For any response, wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, do so through the chair, through me, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, we have established an email address for public comment. That is publiccomments@danvillersma.gov. This email is shown online with the streaming of this meeting. Residents may email comments, and they will be provided, read out loud after staff has confirmed their name and address. All email must contain the date and phrase Conservation Commission in the subject line. We have also established a phone line for public comment, so you may call 978-777-0001, extension 2, to provide comment. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All right. Having said that, I'll call this meeting to order. And let's begin with the regular agenda. And that is, this is the continued public hearing of the notice of intent for Beverly Airport, 191 Old Burley Street, DEP file number 14-1347. The applicant is Gloria Bullion, and ready to begin. Are you there, Gloria? And if I recall, this meeting was continued out to allow for some further input from, I think, from Mark. Is Mark there?
Yes, he is.
Okay. All right, can we begin?
Certainly. This is Dan Nitchie with GZA, representing the airport. And I Mr. Chairman, I think that was why we continued the meeting, to allow the public to speak. I don't believe there was any specific issues or questions that you had for us technically.
All right, well, let's hear from Mark Zubarek. If I think he had some technical difficulty at our last meeting. So did you want to add something, Mark?
Absolutely. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So if you can hear me, I can see you, but somehow we have technical difficulties on this process that we're going through with this COVID-19 restrictions. First thing, what I'd like to say is that Mr. Wilson last meeting made a very good suggestion that these meetings should be happening in person as the selectmen and the other boards in our town. So that's just my comment to you as the default chairman at the moment. You weren't there last time, so now you got the job. See? It works. One of my comments, and
I was there, Mark, for the last meeting. But go ahead.
No, you left to go down to Cape.
Oh, okay.
I listened. So the only thing that I wanted to assure our residents in our town is that the fence is basically a replacement for the existing fence, and that no trees or bushes that are on the Danvers property line or in Danvers are being removed. Because I have expressed my views last time, and I don't know if you guys heard it, but in 1997 or 98, when I was on the Board of Selectmen, we had a very serious incident in where the Beverly Airport, in their great wisdom, came through and cut many, many of the trees that were in their way of their runway. And all I wanted to do is I want to hear somebody say that this will not happen this time, because the fence is only a replacement for the existing fence, and it's going to be in the same location.
Well, we understand, Mark, we understand your issue about the not being on private property, but we're actually looking to have the fence taken out of the wetlands wherever possible, which would bring it further away from property lines, I believe.
And as long as it's within the airport property lines, that's great. I mean, we can't do anything about that because the airport exists. But the thing is, I just wanted to make sure that we don't have a reoccurrence of the same incident, because that was very serious at that time, and there was really no response from Beverly Airport. And I know that the current manager was not there at the time, but
could someone from Beverly Airport address that question and reassure Mr. Zubarek and whoever else might be concerned that you will not be putting the fence on private property?
Sure. Craig Schuster, Airport Solutions Group. That is correct. All the fence is being replaced, some of it in the same spot, but most of it's kind of being relocated, try to get outside of the wetlands. And if we are near any property line, I make sure I'm at least 10 feet off of that. So anything we do will be all on airport property, will not be on any Danvers private property that abuts the airport.
Is that
so if I may, Mike, the clearing of the 10 feet on the Danvers side of the property, is that within the bounds of the airport property lines?
Yes. So anywhere in the fence, anywhere, this is Craig Schuster again, anywhere.
I can barely hear that.
Can you hear me?
Very little, but I'll listen.
Can everyone else hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, just fine. Yes, coming through strong.
So you know, anytime if the fence was too close to the property line, the airport property line, I would offset it 10 feet from there so they can have room to maintain the fence and we can clear it. Because we definitely don't want to clear on somebody else's property. We cannot do that. We do not have the authorization to do that. So wherever it came close, I try to push the fence away from the property line. Did you hear that, Mark?
So what you're telling me, and then just to, repeat what I thought I heard, is that the fence is 10 feet within the boundaries of the property lines on the side of Danvers.
And no, Danvers, it's all on the airport, Mark. Everything is on airport property. Everything, the clearing, the fence. We're not going to be anywhere off airport property.
That's fine. Then I'm all set. The only thing is, we're going to affect the general public, the residents in the area, and they have expressed that same view to me because last time we were not able to get the concern across because of technical difficulties. So hopefully, maybe the town somehow will resolve this system and let you guys have this meeting in person. So I want to thank you for answering that question, and I'll just give you a heads up. I'll be watching because that is something that has happened, and I don't want that to happen again for anybody else.
Thank you. And the board thanks you for your input, Mark. All right. I have a question for the applicant. The applicant's looking for a waiver for the 25-foot no disturb to allow to work in that area. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And were you also looking for a waiver on the 35 as well?
Yes.
If we need that.
Yeah, but you're not building anything, right?
Correct.
So why would you need the waiver on the 35?
Well, if we don't need it, then we don't need it.
Thank you. Whatever your policy is.
Well, we have a 35 no build.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think Craig may have indicated there may be permanent fence posts within that 35 no build, and that's where that waiver would be applicable. So I suggest granting a waiver for both the 25 and 35 in the chance there are fence posts that fall in the 35.
Are we saying that fencing is considered build?
We'll get to that later when we actually talk about definitions, but as the commission's been standing, their operation has been, permanent fixtures that remain are considered structures and something that would be built. So in the past, fences have been considered permanent structures in the 35. And I think this would be a safeguard for the applicant to request both of those if the commission.
All right, well, I'm okay. I just recall in the past that we weren't considering fences as building if somebody put a fence along.
Right.
But you're saying, for safety's sake, that we would consider a waiver on the 35 as well?
Correct. If the commission wants to issue that, I would suggest that.
All right, just to be clear, is it a position then that if a fence being placed in within the area of no disturb would require a waiver on the 35 because we're considering the post to be a build?
In previous discussions, this is in terms of the commission has considered fences as permanent structures. Also, the maintenance that would be required on that fence post, I think that giving that waiver gives a little bit more safeguard for the applicant if they have to go back into that area. But for you defining the fence in the 35, that's not something that's defined under our bylaw exactly what's allowed under there. So David can jump in, but I would assume it's up to interpretation for each situation at hand until we get a definite definition.
All right, I like that. Okay. So we could grant a waiver to, limited to the fence and the post, so that we're not granting a waiver to build anything else.
Yeah, so you'd be granting waiver you're granting waiver to allow work within the 25 and the 35. The 35, and you could just blanket as the fence installation work and the work that's required for the repairs.
Right. Okay. All right. I'm going to open it up to the board for questions. So, Vanessa, do you have some questions?
I just have one question for Craig. Are there any locations on the plans where the fence is less than 10 feet from the property line, or were you able to get it 10 feet all the way around?
Yes, the second thing, Vanessa, we got 10 feet all the way around. There's only one small area where we're at the 10 feet. Other than that, we're more than 10 feet everywhere else.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann McGill?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
All right. Chelsea?
I know this topic was brought up when I wasn't here. I had a question about the wood mats. I'm just curious, like, what exactly they are. Like, what kind of wood, what kind of material? Are they, like, pressure-treated wood, etc.?
Oh, no. They're either spruce or they're typically, most often, they're oak. And they're lagged together. Typically, they're 4 feet wide by 16 feet long, and they lay those sections out. That would be a wood timber mat. We also, in our application, indicated that potentially synthetic mats could be used, like a plastic or aluminum mats might be used. But the timber would be the largest of all of them. The other ones are smaller.
All right. That was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have a follow-up to that, but I'll wait. Peter, you have some questions or comments?
Just one quick question. Do you have any idea on the timing for construction? I know the last time we spoke, that was still up in the air. I just wonder if there's any more.
Craig Schuster, Airport Solutions Group. Yeah, nothing has changed at this moment. It all depends on funding from MassDOT.
Okay, thanks. Other than that, I'm fine.
All right. Follow-up would be, how long will the mats remain in place?
Mike, this is Dan Nitschke, GZA. I would assume that in most sections, the mats don't need to be there more than a week. I mean, they'll probably be there for 3 or 4 days. And what they do is they leapfrog the sections of mats to the next work area because they're very expensive, actually, to have on site for the entire time. So they bring in a set amount and they just move them around. So they won't be in any one place for very long.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Just for clarification, under Army Corps standards, it's no more than 30 days. Typically, they allow for longer, but they like them to be no more than 30 days.
Okay. If it was going to be more than 30, you'd let us know?
Yeah, we'll let you know, but we don't foresee any reason for that.
All right. Thank you. All right. If that's all the comments from the board at this time?
Mr. Chair, just a reminder, not assuming you would, but reminder to close the hearing after we do our comment.
Yeah, well, we're going to
Wonderful.
We're going to open it up for questions from anyone who's listening in or on the phone. So can we do that now?
Sure, Mr. Chair. This is David here. We don't have any email correspondence.
None. All right. Do we have any call-ins?
Mr. Chair, we do not have any call-ins.
All right. So we're having no call-ins, no email comments. I move that, does someone want to make a motion to close the public hearing?
This is Ann. I move that we close the public hearing on the Beverly Airport Department File 14-13 1347.
I'll second the motion.
All right, motion's been made. We have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? And I'll take a roll call on that. Vanessa?
Yes.
All right. Michael, that's me. Yes. Ann Miguel?
Yes.
All right, Chelsea?
Yes.
Chelsea King?
I said yes.
The delay here.
Hmm.
All right. All right, and Peter
Yes.
Wilson.
Yes.
All right, before we vote on the notice of intent, there is a request for waivers. I'll take them one at a time. The first waiver is a request to allow work in the 25-foot no disturb zone as been described by the applicant. So does someone want to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion, Mike, that we grant a waiver to allow work within the 25-foot no disturb zone.
All right, motion's been made. Do we have a second?
Second the motion.
All right, and I guess again, I'll take a roll call on that. All right. All in favor, and I'll say Vanessa.
Yes.
All right, myself, Michael Spillane, yes. Ann Miguel,
Yes.
Chelsea King,
Yes.
Peter Wilson.
Yes.
All right, so that motion carries. There's also a further motion, which the applicant has requested to do work within the 35 no build zone, which I believe is restricted to the installation of the fence posts. But does someone want to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion that we grant a waiver for work to be done within the 35-foot waiver at the Beverly Airport, 190 Old Burley Road.
All right, motion's been made. Is there a second?
This is Ann. I second the motion.
All right, seconded by Ann McGill. All right, and I'm going to ask all in favor, and I'll go down. Vanessa, Karen,
Yes.
Myself, Michael Spillane, yes. Ann McGill,
Yes.
yes. Chelsea King,
Yes.
and Peter Wilson.
Yes.
All right, so motion carries. Now that the waivers have been granted, does someone want to issue an order of conditions on the notice of intent for Beverly Airport 191 Old Burley, DEP file number 14-1347.
I'll go ahead. I'd make a motion that we grant an order of conditions for Beverly Airport, 190 Old Burley Road, a DEP file number 14-1347, with at least the following two conditions. One, that all concrete footings that are removed from the ground are removed from the site, and that all trash is picked up around all the work sites.
That's the motion. Could I just add, I'm not adding, but just for clarification, when we walked that, and you walked it, Peter, there were a number of footings that had been pushed out of the ground, either from frost action or freezing. And is the applicant, I'm not sure if they answered, are they going to pull all the footings out or the ones that are exposed?
Craig Schuster, Airport Solutions Group. The ones that are definitely exposed, I would definitely pull out. The ones that are in the ground, I tend not to want to do that because you tend to cause more damage than you need to. But that's up to the commission. If they want to take them out, we will.
And I leave it to the motion maker if what to be specific on that issue.
Well, I would think that we'd want them all pulled out because it seemed to me that every concrete footing that we saw had been affected by some frost action. I don't think we saw any where they were completely buried. So I think anything that's in the wetlands, anything that's in the wetlands, the frost has forced up. So I would say let's pull them out.
So the motion is with the condition that all the footings be removed. Is that correct, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. That's the motion. Do we have any other conditions?
Mr. Chairman, can I interrupt just for clarification in writing the order? So even if the footings are not exposed, do you want them removed, or should we say all exposed footings? Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
That was the motion. Yeah.
All footings, Georgia.
Got it.
All footings.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think if they are fully buried, I think they should be left in place. I agree that a lot of them were exposed, but if it is not exposed, I think we should write it that if they're not exposed, they can be left in place for the reason of, digging it up if there's already dirt over the top of it is going to be causing more disturbance than just cutting off the fence post, in my opinion.
Okay, my response to that would be that, they're all popping up and they're going to pop up eventually. So let's just get them out of there. I mean, there's going to be disturbance as part of construction anyways.
Yeah. Does anyone else on the board want to weigh in on that? Well, you can do so by voting on the motion, of course. I tend to agree with Peter just get them out of there.
All right, that's fine.
All right, we have a motion. Any more discussion by the board? No. All right. Does someone want to second the motion?
I'll second the motion to issue an order of conditions for DEP file number 14-1347.
All right. Motion's been made, and it has now been seconded by Vanessa Curran. So I'll take a roll call. All in favor? And I'll start with Vanessa Curran.
Yes.
Yes. Myself, Michael Spillane, yes. Ann McGill.
Yes.
Elsie King.
Yes.
All right. And Peter Wilson.
Yes.
All right. The motion carries. And good luck with the airport.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The matter is a request for certificate of compliance, 102 Poplar Street, DEP file number 14-938. And the applicant is attorney James F. Mears, Jr. How are you, Jim?
I'm well, Mr. Chairman. How are you?
Good. All right, let's hear what you have.
So there was a notice of intent filed originally in June of 2004 by a former owner, Phyllis Dykins, on this DEP file number 14-938. Apparently, Ms. Dykins was interested in expanding the foundation and erecting a new residence at 102 Poplar Street. Apparently, through a title search, we've discovered that she ran into significant financial problems, eventually was facing a mortgage foreclosure, and ended up in 2013 deeding this property to the assignee that held the mortgage at the time, and therefore never began or completed the work that was set forth in her proposal and her request for this order of conditions. So in effect, we believe we have an invalid order at this point. The only construction that was done was the addition of a landing and some steps to the current structure. and therefore we are asking on that basis that a certificate of compliance be ordered by the board.
All right, and if I recall, I had spoken with staff that they were gonna go out there and confirm the limit of work, the small amount of work that was done. Is that correct?
Correct. So I took a view from the front of the dwelling, a little bit of the driveway. It's very apparent that the addition is not there, and that small landing was.
All right, is that it? Any questions from the board? No, and I have none. I will ask, are there any email comments regarding this matter?
Mr. Chair, there are no email comments.
Are there any phone comments regarding this matter?
Mr. Chair, there are no phone comments.
Does someone want to make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance? And you know what? I think that deserves a little explanation on just if anyone's listening in. Would you, Judge, do you mind just explaining why we issue a certificate of compliance on work that wasn't done?
Sure. Well, first, closing, we always want to make sure our orders are closed out. As Mr. Mears mentioned, if this home were to be sold and repurchased again, the old order is tied to the title. One, that helps new homeowners aware of any work that's happened on the property in regards to conservation. And typically we wouldn't allow a future project to happen on the site unless the order was closed out. So usually in a case, we want certificate of compliances so we can confirm the work the board approved is exactly what was built. In this case, we're seeing that nothing was built. So we're confirming that, hey, this was approved, but it was actually never built. So it's really just a process to close everything.
Yes, and will that appear on the certificate that gets recorded? Would it show that the work wasn't in fact done?
Correct. So what's going to happen is if the commission issues a certificate of compliance tonight, the COC that I fill out, it will be for an invalid order, which means that an order was issued, a project was approved, but the work never commenced and the order has since expired. So really what would be tied to the deed is a certificate of compliance, closing it out, saying it's invalid.
Okay, thank you for that excellent explanation. All right, having done that, does someone want to make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 102 Poplar Street?
I'll make a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for 102 Poplar Street, DEP file number 14-938.
Okay, motion's been made. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, second by Chelsea King. All right, let's go through the list, and I'll start with Vanessa Curran.
Yes.
Yes. Michael Splain is yes. Ann McGill.
Yes.
Chelsea King.
Yes.
And Peter Wilson.
Yes.
Okay. Motion's been made, been seconded, and all in favor have indicated favor, the board, so it's allowed. Good luck with that, Mr. Mears.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Moving on to our third matter, which is request for an informal discussion, 152 Endicott Street. And I'm interested, this is the old Denny's.
Can I just jump in for a second here? Did we need to close the hearing on that?
Oh, on the request for certificate of compliance? I think we probably did. I guess I'll move now and that we retroactively close the hearing for 102 Poplar Street, DEP file number 14-938.
I'll second that motion.
All right, second motion to close the hearing has been seconded. And I'll go down and that, all in favor? Let's start with, and that motion was made by Vanessa Curran. Thank you, Vanessa, for pointing that out. And I'll go down the list. Vanessa?
Yes.
Yes. Myself, Michael Swain, yes. Ann McGill,
Yes.
Elsie King,
Yes.
Peter Wilson,
Yes.
yes. All right. We're closed, and just for the record, we have voted to issue a certificate of compliance for that matter. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. All right, the third matter is, again, the request for an informal discussion by the applicant Fairfield Residential, the property at 152 Endicott Street.
Yeah,
And who's here for the applicant?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is John Shipe.
Yes, hi, John.
Mr. Chairman. Very good. So, thank you very much. As you stated, we would like to just have this informal presentation to you this evening, and we'll just quickly go over where we're headed. But again, I'm John Shipe. I'm a licensed engineer, and I'm here on behalf of Fairfield Residential. I'm a special consultant to them. And also speaking tonight is Ann Martin from LEC, and will do most of the heavy lifting, and is our environmental scientist. Also on the line, Rob Hewitt is Vice President of Fairfield Residential. Our civil engineer is with us tonight, Brian McCarthy, and Janice Carroll is also on the line and works for me. However, we don't envision that we'll keep this very brief, and we'll do most of the talking. Just wanted to give you a basic overview. Most of us have been on boards and committees in the Commonwealth in the past, so we know what it's like. We thank you for your time this evening, and we'll try and keep it very brief. As you stated, it's the currently closed and dilapidated Denny's property and the old, I think, Days Inn Hotel. Very underutilized. We look at this as a great opportunity for us to come in and redevelop the property with an apartment community of 208 units. And we've been looking at this site for about a year. We've had several meetings, informal meetings with town staff. We're incrementally moving forward on the project. We anticipate submitting for a use variance in a couple of weeks and having a meeting with the zoning board in mid-October. And if all continues to go well, we look forward to submitting a notice of intent with you in about 6 to 8 weeks. So I don't envision at this point there's any questions I could answer, but I'd be glad to. And so if Ann is ready to take the baton from me, you could give an overview of the property and our program and where we're headed, right, Ann?
Yeah,
Yes.
before you do that, would you just state what the current zoning is there, what it's allowed?
It's a commercial zone, and multifamily is not an allowed use. However, based on all of the parameters on this particular property, its location, state of the economy, and the fact that it's been closed, I think, for more than 10 years, it's really not a property. It's not a property that is viable for pretty much anything else than a multifamily project. And so that's the use variance that we'll be seeking.
You don't think it could be another Denny's of sort?
Another what, Mr. Chairman?
I say you don't think there could be another Denny's there of some sort?
Oh, yes, I think probably not, right.
All right. That's all I have.
Okay. I am going to share my screen. And hopefully this is working. You can see it? Okay. I can't see that you can see it, but that works for me. Yeah. So what's on the screen right now is an existing conditions plan. I will run through that, and then I will run over a proposed plan. Both of these are sketches. We have only done preliminary design work, but on the screen you will see along the bottom is the Waters River with Endicott Street across the top. There is a small section of frontage at Endicott Street where I'm showing with my cursor. And there is also frontage at Endicott at the lighted intersection to enter the mall and to enter where Bed Bath & Beyond is. There, the Porter River is a tidal river. So the yellow line along the bottom designates an estimated location for coastal bank. It's a coastal tidal river. So the mean annual high water elevation of 4.2 sets the elevation for the river and for the setbacks for the 200-foot riverfront, which you see here, arcing from a small little tidal inlet stream that is to the west and a small tidal inlet stream that is to the east, and then of course the Waters River. The dark green is an estimated boundary of a BVW. That estimation is based on aerial interpretation of the Mass GIS, and then my office has been out and we generally cross-check that just for planning purposes. And then the site is within land subject to coastal storm flowage set by FEMA at elevation 10. And that is this, this dark dashed line that basically runs around the perimeter of the project site. And then there's the 25, the 35, and the 100-foot setback from the BVW. And as we all know, the orange building is the former Denny's, and then the two motel pieces. And then all of this gray represents the existing parking lot that surrounds the restaurant and the two former hotels. And then this tan area here is a swimming pool that has now been filled in and the walkway access to that. Any questions on this before I move to the next plan? Okay. So this is the same.
Sorry, I do have a question. I couldn't get unmute fast enough. So you have not delineated the wetland in the field?
We have not delineated the wetland in the field yet. We're at the point now that we will go out and do that. So when we file a notice of intent with you, these plans will be refined to more accurately represent that delineation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So this is the plan with the proposed layout on it. The red line shows you the existing limit of pavement on the project site. So what you can see from that is that, again, this orange is the proposed multifamily building with a courtyard and a garage parking attached to the building with 10 surface parking spaces at the front here, with an access entrance coming in again at the lighted intersection at Endicott Street. And so what you can see is we have significantly pulled the building and the parking and the paving and the work further away from the Waters River and further away from the wetland along this side and even along this side. There are some areas where under existing conditions, there is pavement within the 25 and the 35, and there are some small areas in the northerly parts of the project where we will still need to request a waiver for work in the 25 or the 35. And of course, we have a small stream and wetland crossing for the access that we would need a 25 and 35-foot waiver for that work as well. For the crossing, the project would have to comply with the stream crossing standards, and we would present all of that information along with any wetland restoration or replication that was required in the notice of intent. But this kind of gives you a quick look at the project, and we're just happy to answer questions or seeking any initial feedback that you might have.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah. How many units are contemplated?
208.
How many parking spaces are contemplated?
355. 345 are in the garage, and then 10 are surface parking spaces.
And those are what, for visitors or business transaction, things like that?
I'll have to have another member of the team answer
Sure.
that question.
Yes, the parking that's at grade and exterior is for people visiting the clubhouse and visitors. You just have to have a few, at grade at the front of the property.
Okay, won't you have to present us what typical, what would be allowed uses, or at least explore that?
I mean, this is a redevelopment of a project in Riverfront area, so we would need to meet the redevelopment standards for that. I'm not sure that
I'm not hearing her.
Yeah. Ann, I don't know whether everybody can hear you, Ann.
I hear you.
I'll try and answer. It's the question, well, what we're presenting this evening is a program that we think best accommodates the constraints on the property, and they're extensive, and ends up with a project that's viable relative to, the local industries in the area, the other land uses, and we're going to point out to you where we may need waivers from the 25 and the 35 or any other constraints. Is there a more specific question, or? Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay?
I heard you, yeah.
Yeah, good, okay, thank you.
Yeah. I didn't have another question.
Mike, were you referring basically to an alternatives analysis? Is that what you were meaning?
Well, I'm just thinking, yeah, what, are they proposing anything other than that? Or that's basically it? And do they need to do an alternative analysis?
Well, I can tell you, as you ask questions like that, either this evening or during the process, we would be glad to explain to you our thought process and the various iterations that we went through during our due diligence studies. That particular, in general, I can tell you that the attempt was made to balance between how large this property is, what is a good density, what are the constraints around the perimeter. There are numerous other permitting efforts that we need to make, including going through MIPA. There's a Chapter 91 jurisdictional line that we need to comply with and seek that permit. That's a constraint. That pushes some of the buildable area back from the Waters River. And the access to the property is something I don't know that Ann had a chance to mention. The current access is a right in, right out, and that's basically a temporary access. We can't use it. That's another constraint on the property. We cannot reuse it as we redevelop the property. Mass Highway is put into a land taking of many years ago, stating that Chalet Court would exist for the access to the property. So many constraints like that, we'd be glad to continue to answer them. I'll check periodically, make sure that all those good words were heard.
Yeah, we can hear you, John.
Okay, thank you.
somehow I got dropped off.
That's okay, Ann, thanks.
All right, did you want to continue on, or does the board have questions?
I have a question.
How tall is the project?
We're talking about a building that's approximately 67 feet tall at its tallest point.
How many floors is that?
4-story, I believe. Right, Brian? It's a 4-story building.
Is parking underneath?
No.
No, there's no parking underneath. Another constraint, both horizontal and vertical. The vertical constraint, of course, is that we're close to the river. We have a relatively shallow groundwater here, so it doesn't make it practical for us to be going underground at all. Around the perimeter is the coastal floodplain. As you can see, as the tide comes in and out of the water's river, the floodplain comes up onto portions of the site. And so that's another constraint that we deal with. So nothing underground, no.
John, this is Brian McCarthy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So just to clarify on that height, it's a 5-story building.
You would think I would know that. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. And have you looked at the current impervious and how much impervious you would be adding?
Yes, this is Brian. So yes, we have looked at that based on our concept layout plans. And again, we're still at the concept level here in design, but we are, based on these plans, we are reducing the impervious area on the site significantly, actually. The site itself will be, the impervious area would be reduced by almost 15,000 square feet. And we do need to build out Chalet Court for access. A lot of that area right now is pervious land, grassed area. But when I look at that, the net difference and the calculations, I still end up with a reduced impervious area for the overall project.
All right. I know Peter Wilson has a question.
Yes, the riverfront boundaries, you are going to be building within the 200 foot boundary. That's correct, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And how about the 100-foot boundary?
I believe that that may be correct for the corner of the building. And under existing conditions, the existing pavement probably comes within about 50 feet of the river. Brian, you might know that measurement better than I do.
Yes, it actually does come pretty close. At some locations, it's almost 40 feet. It's like 40 feet. And
Yeah.
you are correct in terms of the building will occur within the 100 feet river line.
Okay, because there are limitations on that we'll have to work through. And I see that you're going to want a wetlands crossing, right, as part of the access road.
That is correct.
And you're prepared to replicate some wetlands somewhere else on the site as part of that?
That is correct.
Okay. And my final question is, do you have any reservations about tearing down that Denny's? Because that was home to one of the funniest movie scenes that I can remember.
What was that?
We all know what I'm talking about, right?
No, what is that?
That was with Melissa McCarthy and Sandra Bullock. When they were, other people are chuckling, they know.
Oh,
that's not material here. It's just that's whenever I have out of town people, we always point that out. Okay, that's all I have, Mike.
all right. Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to ask a quick question. So the apartment building itself is 5 stories of apartments. How many stories or how many levels are there in the parking garage?
There's 5 levels up in the parking garage as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, can I ask one more quick question?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, this is, it's got to go through the planning board, right? Because this is, or the zoning board of appeals? Because this area is not zoned for multifamily dwellings?
It would have to be both, Peter.
Okay. Okay, it just, I mean, I wish you luck because, I mean, it's the site is an eyesore right now, so hopefully we can get something done down there.
We agree. Thank you.
All right. I guess I should ask, is there anyone that emailed in on this?
Hi, Mr. Chair, we don't have any email, but I believe we have a phone call.
All right, I'd like to hear that.
So I got a phone call from Joseph O'Neill of 3.5 Essex Street, and he said that he does not feel that this meets the Chapter 91 guidelines.
Yeah, well, thank you for that comment. Certainly something that we would look into, and it's incumbent on us to make sure that we do eventually comply with Chapter 91 requirements. So we'll take
Did
that.
the caller, Alicia, did the caller say specifically what area of the guideline it didn't meet?
No.
Just generally? All right. Thank you.
Could we ask for an explanation of what specifically is subject on this property to Chapter 91? I'm familiar with that for, you know, docks and piers and things that are going into navigable waters. How does this project, how is it subject to Chapter 91?
Ann, is that something you can take?
I can take it. We actually did not put the Chapter 91 information on this plan because it's a little outside your jurisdiction, and I was trying to clean up the plan. So I apologize to that and it making it more difficult to answer the question. Historically, there was a tidal creek that went through the center of this site. And when the Denny's and the hotel were built, that tidal creek was relocated to the west. So the footprint of the previous tidal creek is Chapter 91 jurisdiction, and a portion of the project site falls within jurisdiction that would require permitting. That's kind of the short answer to the complicated waterways.
Are there other concerns like wildlife, traffic studies, altering of that stream?
Go ahead, Ann. Well, let me speak just to the other than the wildlife concern, Ann. I'll turn that back to you. But that is a great question, and it is incumbent on my team to have tried to study all of the different things that could, we could stumble across as we go through all of the different design, development, and permitting. We've studied the traffic. We'll be providing the town with a traffic study. We are very confident that what we're proposing is going to be accommodated by the local roadways. Again, utilities, we've looked at that. We're talking to the town about all the different utilities to be provided. We don't see any other obstacles that we're not going to be able to account for. And Ann, relative to wildlife and fauna, if you want to chime in on that.
So I don't want to disparage a Phragmites wetland, but this is a Phragmites wetland. Pretty much, it's almost 100% infested with Phragmites around the site. And the stream within that narrow section where the crossing is essentially receiving a lot of surface water that's coming off of the roads, and I believe even coming off of like the mall complex. So the source, even some of the sources of the water into the stream are not the most natural. That's not to say that there could be some groundwater intrusion or feeding into that, but it's pretty much parking lot water being discharged, from what we can tell, into a predominantly Phragmites wetland system.
I could also say that I think that the water, as well as the shopping carts in the wetland, are sourced by the shopping center.
I know that.
So as part of the wetland crossing and talking about doing wetland replication, is there an invasives management portion that you think would apply here?
I think invasive management here would be exceedingly difficult. If this was a wetland system that had a small patch of Phragmites and the majority of the system was intact with native species, I think that including invasive species management might be an appropriate measure. But I can't see how we could really effectively address invasive species management with such a strong prevalence of Phragmites all through the wetland system along the river system. It's in that whole tidal section, and that's very, very difficult to successfully do when you're surrounded by so much Phragmites.
Okay, thank you.
And hi, this is David here. Is it fair to say that basically west of 128 up the Waters River is pretty much Phragmites?
Yes, I mean, I haven't walked the whole system, but I'm very familiar with this area just generally. I'm a resident of Beverly, so I live in the general area. I think that is a pretty accurate statement.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Yes, is there anything else you want to show us?
Mr. Chairman, no, that's all we had this evening, just a general overview. But thank you. If there's no other questions, we really appreciate your time.
All right, I hope you were taking notes.
We were.
Okay.
Mike, just one
And I
more.
know some of our questions are outside of, you might say we're outside of our jurisdiction, but we're trying to take them, I think in a way, we talk about taking a broader approach, because it was suggested that, we want to know all the relief you're going for, just to know that, you're not just coming to us, you're going to DTAC, Planning, Board of Appeals, and wherever else. Yeah. But anyway, I want to make that comment.
Yeah, we thank you.
Mike, just one more quick comment, if I could, please. When we get to, when you're filing a notice of intent, we're obviously going to want a pretty extensive site visit. So just, be prepared for that.
That's a site visit, visiting the property and looking at it?
Right.
Yes, absolutely. By all means, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
All right. We all set here? Anything from staff?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
All set on our end.
All right. Well,
And
let's
thank
move
you.
on.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. The next matter on our agenda is minutes. July 23rd, 2020, August 13th, 2020, and August 27th, 2020. I'll confess I have not read the minutes. Let's start with July 23rd. Who's read that?
Mike, the minutes are not finished.
Okay. Well, let's move on to, we'll go over that on the next, do you think by the next meeting, Alicia?
Yes.
Or put it further out?
Nope, next meeting.
All right, so we'll revisit that at the next meeting. All right, and now on to old new business. We do have the new zoning bylaw language. I look forward to going through that. I'd rather go through this now and maybe talk about it later, unless someone wants to talk about it now. I like what I looked at.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Mike. So staff has a PowerPoint planned for this first initial discussion that we're having tonight.
All right.
So I can talk through that. I was going to keep it limited considering we're at 8:15 now.
Yeah, that would be good.
So I can run through that a little bit, give an overview, if you want me to jump in, if that's right with you, Mike.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. You're going to put something up on the screen?
Yes, I am.
All right.
I'm going to grab everyone's attention. I'm going to try. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Hey, Georgia, just to interrupt, are we still on open meeting?
Yes, we are still on the broadcast at open meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And if the public is out there and like to make comments on any of these, they are more than welcome to. And of course, the committee as well. And feel free to just stop me anytime if you have any questions. And for the members, I put the updated bylaw in your packet. So if you want to follow along on the language, you can, but it's not necessary. It's not very organized in that direction. So just to give a general overview of the bylaw and where we're starting. So the original bylaw we have in our general bylaw now was adopted by the town in 1988. It's been quite a while, and that bylaw was modeled after the MACC model bylaw, which is what I referenced in our last hearing when we talked about this, which was kind of our boilerplate language. So what you see here on the right side, this is the index that you see in the model bylaw that MACC put out. So a lot of the towns around here and in the Commonwealth have this general structure in their bylaw. Ours, as it stands today, is an identical copy of what MACC had provided. So in updating our bylaw, we review what we already have existing, what MACC has updated. So the last time they updated their model bylaw was in 2006. So that's a pretty substantial change from the 1988 version. So updates that we've included in this version today include those 2006 updates, as well as updates we've seen from other towns, especially towns that are similar to us. You know, Beverly, Manchester, Gloucester, they have a lot of residential pier permits, so modeling a lot of our regulations after experiences they've had in their bylaws was kind of a guide for this. And just as general, what I always remind myself too, the bylaw is the skeleton and the regulations are the muscle and the brain. So here what we're reviewing and what the commission's really updating is the skeleton. And then the regulations where we can work, the commission can work kind of outside of that town meeting process to update can be done at the local, our local meetings. So I'm just getting a little feedback, sorry. To give a good comparison, so this is our existing index in the bylaw is today. Again, boilerplate similar to what we see in a lot of other towns. What we have is great. And then what we have on the right screen is what we've proposed and what we've updated in the bylaw. So you can see we have 3 new sections. And for reference, the highlights are major sections that have changed. So the unhighlighted parts, really the language hasn't stayed. It's all still applicable to today. It's really just process formality language about how to submit a permit, deadlines. Those have not changed. So those will remain as is. But the highlighted ones and the additional ones are either things that have been expanded upon or things that have been added. So for example, emergency projects, we've made that into its own section. No new language has been added, but we figured highlighting it as its own chapter was important. So you can see 3 new sections added, but again, not major changes. And then I jumped into the sections and I figured we could start with one and maybe next week jump into another. So our big one is that we can look at first is jurisdiction. So that's section 2 in the bylaw. Basically, you're saying, hey, this is what the commission protects. This is where we have our authority. That's listed in the Wetlands Protection Act, what I'm going to call the WPA. So what we have in the WPA is automatically what we have in our bylaw, but we also have the opportunity to expand upon those jurisdictions. So our existing bylaw is great. It covers, it basically says, hey, you can't alter in a resource area. You can't alter in the 100-foot buffer. That's pretty standard. What it doesn't have is the 200-foot riverfront area. Not meaning we don't protect that because we're protected by that under the act, but it's not called out in our bylaw. So we've added language to basically call out the 200-foot riverfront area. And what we do not call out now is vernal pools. So a lot of towns have adopted to specifically protect vernal pools. Vernal pools in the act now, they are not regulated on their own. They're regulated if they're associated with another resource area. So if you have a vernal pool that's connected to a bordering vegetated wetland or land subject to flooding, that will be protected. But if you don't have those other resource areas, if you just have an isolated vernal pool, which is not uncommon, those don't have a buffer zone and they are not protected. So under this new proposal, we're proposing that vernal pools, whether they're attached to another resource area or not, would have a 100-foot buffer zone. So that's a new addition. Yes.
If I could, will that affect detention or retention ponds?
That's a great question. So there is a provision in the act that says, man-made stormwater structures. So for example, if you go up to Whipple Hill, one of the detention basins up there is holding water, and it's now actually grown cattails, and it's establishing as essentially what you could consider a resource area. There are certain provisions under the act that kind of protect those from gaining a buffer, but those non-engineered sites, maybe there's increased stormwater to a certain area and eventually becomes a resource area, those would become protected.
Thank you.
Got it. So vernal pools, we would add those, and if just for some clarification, we have a couple certified vernal pools in town. Those are mainly near the town forest, LaBelle's Grove, and the Ipswich River area, and a couple behind Endicott Park. So there are areas where protection is valid, and then also areas where vernal pools could be expanded, especially behind, again, Endicott Park, Beaver Brook, connections to Frostfish Brook. Behind the high school, there's small pockets of areas that I'm sure if someone were to go out there and attempt to certify them, they could be shown as certified. So just thinking ahead in the future for development, protecting those areas now to get ahead of it is suggested. And similar to vernal pools, I proposed protecting isolated wetlands, not something we see commonly, but under the act, they're not protected unless, again, they touch another resource area. So it's uncommon we would find an isolated area of 5,000 square feet or more that's not attached to something, but again, there's always advantages to taking that precaution. So we define those now. And then one of the bigger changes that we're proposing for this bylaw update is changing the 25, what we call now the 25 and the 35, changing that to a 35 and a 50. So that would be a 35-foot absolute no disturb that extends from the resource area, and then a 50-foot buffer zone, which really extends from the resource area, but 36 to 50 feet, you can only do certain things. So here, like what I'd said before, the bones of the bylaw is saying, hey, we're establishing a 35 and a 50, and then in the regulations is where we can kind of build upon, hey, no new structures in the 50, but if you have to, you need to request a waiver, or if you're putting a new building in the 50-foot no build, it can only be 10% of the total no build zone. So there's room to kind of play around with the regulations that we require from applicants for these specific zones, but we are suggesting that these zones be established and adopted in this bylaw update, especially with the 50 no build. I've seen a lot of towns adopting that 50. If anything, seeing 75 is also just as common. But I believe 50 is appropriate for the resource areas we have in town, and especially the types of development we have. So the 35 and the 50 was proposed, and
Georgia,
yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I was just getting used to 25, 35, you know. What is the rationale for the larger, the 50-foot no build zone?
Great question. So a lot of the bylaws mention it now, but it is valid in that if you're disturbing 50 feet away from a resource area, a lot of the alteration you're doing is most likely going to impact as if you're altering 5 or 10 feet from it. And a lot of the research I did, there was actually the town of Tewksbury, they should be recognized, but they had proposed changing their buffer zones to their committee, and they put out a 121-page report on buffer zones. And of course, as the buffer zones get bigger, you see that stormwater is treated better and longer. You see wildlife habitats increased. So that 50 is kind of that defining line where it's not too restrictive, but it still provides a benefit to the resource area and I guess the associated buffer zones within it, if that makes sense.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Georgia, this is David. Do you mind if I just add something quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So for anyone who wants it on the commission or anybody really, we can provide you with that report. Obviously, if you want to go that deep, you certainly can. The other thing I'd add about the 50-foot buffer too, I think to drive it home, I think we're not saying that there's nothing that can happen in that. Clearly, there's activity that can and will happen. I think what we're saying is what activity does happen, we're trying to regulate it better than we do now. So for instance, I think you all might be more familiar with the seemingly incredible amount of swimming pools that come in or get taken out within the 50-foot buffer. And it seems like we struggle with those a bit. I know we do at the staff, and I think you guys do as well, and that there's not super clear guidance in our current book. So I think what we're trying to do is just set that up for when those come in the future, we can handle them a bit better. And Giorgio, correct me if none of that was correct.
No, that was all 100% correct. Yes. Yeah. And I think that especially is the intent, in that a lot of, not only are we kind of modeling what other towns are adopting because that's the new age regulations, but we're also modeling these new regulations and bylaws after kind of what we're seeing in front of the commission and historically what we've seen. So we kind of craft that to what's specific to Danvers. And like David said, we're seeing a lot of those pools, or, hey, I just want to expand my deck, or I want to add an addition for my in-laws to move in. So this kind of thing, we allow provisions to not limit too hard those areas. So I guess I can end with definitions. I think I have minor projects after this, which is pretty in depth, and I know I'm kind of throwing a lot here at the commission. So I'll jump into definitions and then stop for questions if that works.
I don't know if you finished the last bullet on the previous slide, which was peer projects. Did we talk about that?
Oh, thank you, Vanessa. Yes, so I've added residential peer projects into the jurisdiction section, not because there's any more jurisdiction we're adding. I really wanted to add this kind of as a reference for in the regulations where there are a number of things we're requiring. That being, possibly the 18-inch separation, the 24-inch separation, requiring a 2-to-1 for salt marsh restoration or a 1.5-to-1. So we change those and we add those in the regulations, but I thought it was important to call out residential peer projects or peer projects in particular, just so applicants know, hey, this is also something we like to regulate and we specifically monitor. Okay, so those, I've been calling them to myself, these are our big ticket items, our big ticket changes. So while here there are 1 or 2 lines, simply put, and in the bylaw there are a couple of sentences, it's really, again, in the regulations where we can add those provisions for describing them. And definitions, so the bylaw, not unusual to see that there's limited definitions in the bylaw. It's really in the regulations where you see a lot of those describing definitions. So as our bylaw was existing, we had 2 definitions. It was alter and person. Alter is probably the most important definition of the WPA in our bylaw. It really determines everything that an applicant gets brought in for. So alter I've kept untouched. Really what's in our existing bylaw is still applicable today. The words you see on the screen here, these have been added. Again, these kind of add reference and clarification when they're used in the bylaw. So before, our bylaw didn't regulate vernal pools. If it's adopted, it would now. So adding vernal pool to the definition was, I thought, important, kind of just for context. So that's a good example of what definitions we added and why. And that was a big change to that section. Did anyone have any questions? I think it might be or I'll ask you, Mr. Chair, if you want me to keep going, I can, or we can kind of pause, leave an opportunity for the board to read over what we've gone through, and then we can start questions or jump into that next meeting.
Why don't we move on? Why don't we move on, Georgia?
Keep going?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Does anyone have any questions while I'm stopped? Okay, great. And there actually only is a couple more slides. So another really big change we had in the bylaw, talking about projects we've really seen in front of the commission now. This is a good example of what we're proposing to change to kind of streamline that application process. So our current bylaw exemptions mean, hey, you don't need to come in front of the commission. You don't need to file an NOI. These are also exemptions that are defined under the WPA. So in our bylaw, what we exempt is if anyone's maintaining, repairing public service infrastructure. So a good example of that would be, you know, replacing a water main in the street that's 20 feet from a wetland. You know, that's considered an exempt project. That could be sewer lines, water lines, power lines, telephone lines, those sort of projects that fall under public works. Emergency projects are exempt. And we had also noted in our bylaw that anything else that's exempt in the Wetlands Protection Act does not apply to us. So really what we would allow without any filing is these two right here, number 1 and 2. That's not a bad thing. Again, that's typical to see, but we are also seeing, especially with the increase in single family home residential development, like David had said, we're seeing a lot of pools, we're seeing a lot of sheds. We had seen tonight even fences, small things like that. So under the new proposal in the bylaw, where there's a new section called exempt minor projects. So these exempt projects you see listed here, for example, walkways, planting trees, doing soil testing, or turning your lawn into a pool or an addition. Under the Wetland Protection Act, those are exempt from review as long as they meet certain requirements. So again, those are those exemptions. And those requirements are defined by the act. And if you recall, a lot of those are, they must be 50 feet away from the wetland. And they also need to provide erosion controls and site stabilization. So our intent with updating this portion of the bylaw was to allow these projects by staff review. So if you're, as we have it defined, if you're a minor project, if you want to, we can do an example. If you want to turn your lawn into a pool, like we typically see, and you're within the 100-foot buffer zone to a wetland, but you're not in the 50-foot no build or the 35 no disturb, or if you're in the riverfront area, you're at least 50 feet from the mean annual high water line. If you meet those two requirements, then you would be considered a minor project, as long as you can also provide these 3. And in providing that, I've written that in the bylaw that to show evidence of a minor project, we would create an exemption form. So applicants seeking kind of that exempt status, they would fill out an application form. And we will have requirements for what's on that form in the regulations. So I just went through that one really quick. I'm happy to answer questions about the minor project exemption, but to kind of simplify it is right now, you know, people that are doing these minor projects, we're seeing them filing RDAs with the board, which is correct. That's the best process to do it now. But with this new adoption, it would allow them to streamline directly with staff. And then in cases where staff believes it does not meet the minor project, you know, performance standards, then they would be referred to the commission.
So would it go from minor project to RDA?
Correct. Or, you know, that's up to the applicant to decide what it would be. Staff would suggest something, or the commission could suggest. Most likely it would fall in RDA. If it's barely meeting the requirements of a minor project, it would fall into an RDA. If it's really, if we find that they're really impacting or there's much more alteration than a minor project or an RDA, they would go to an NOI.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. That's what I thought.
Yep. I'm interested, and I think David, I don't know if he is as well, but just getting the commission's thoughts on allowing these types of projects at the staff approval level if they meet those certain requirements. I know we've been seeing a lot of those, and the commission's oversight on it has been important. I would just be interested to hear your thoughts on kind of having that be more of a staff review and what you guys think about that.
Well, I'd be interested to know what the process would be for the staff review process. Is it going to be criteria that you do? Are you going to look at some plans? Are you going to go out to sites? Are you going to, how are you going to determine whether it's 50 feet? That sort of thing, or the 100-foot buffer?
Great questions. I'm actually writing these down. So this is also what we'd look to the commission to kind of, as we draft the regulations, to put in there. So the suggestions I've had so far is that, like I had mentioned, they would fill out an exemption request form. And in the form, we could require that they provide a survey or a mortgage plot plan or a GIS printout. So maybe some unofficial maps, still giving us some context, but not limiting homeowners in that they need to, you know, conduct a full-blown survey, because at that point, it's kind of, they might as well file an RDA. So that portion, we're also still researching, kind of figure out how other towns handle that application process at the minor level.
George,
But it would, yeah.
I have a comment on that. I noticed in that number 5 that you had said that the exemption request is not mandatory. That to me seems the very iffy part. If we're going through this process so they don't need to fill out the big form, how will you know if they're not doing the exemption request that indeed they are making changes to their property?
Well, so that's a great question too. So Anne's talking about in the bylaw language draft, I had thrown in there ideas for the exemption request, and it does say the exemption request is not required. So I'd put that provision in there. So if someone were to conduct, you know, just build an addition without checking in with the Conservation Commission first, just in a general sense, they would receive a violation letter or subsequently an enforcement order. So that's, I had put kind of safeguard language in there that had said, hey, we suggest you fill out this form if you want to do this minor project. If you don't fill out this form and you're aware of what's required and you still do it, you'll receive a violation. But I understand where you kind of think that's iffy, and we could make it a requirement off the bat that says if you're a minor project, you have to fill out this form, instead of making it a suggestion.
Right, because you'll have some that are just saying, screw that, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, great idea. So I'll update that.
Hi, this is David again. Sorry to keep barging in. I think, Mr. Splain, your comments were well received, and thank you for those, as well as you, Anne. I think one of the other key parts of this, at the risk of potentially throwing my colleagues in town under the bus, we've been working a lot with the engineering division on their stormwater updates. I think I mentioned that before. And part of that, too, I think will necessitate us to work with them, potentially lean on them, hopefully not too badly, to make the engineering side of our reviews a bit more robust as well. So hopefully that helps you and helps us going forward on a bit more of what those technical aspects of some of the plans we have received or will be receiving clearer to both you and us. So for what that's worth.
It's worth a lot, David.
Thank you.
It is. Thank you. Okay, so any more questions on the minor project section? Just going to jump. This actually is the last slide, just wrapping it up. So I had mentioned before some of the other provisions and changes that were listed that you'll see in the bylaw. I noted the filing fee. The town has their own filing fees on top of what the state requires. So that's something that the commission adopted in their regulations too. I think about 2 or 3 years ago, we had discussed updating those filing fees to be more in line with kind of what's required now in 2020. I think the last time we updated was the early 2000s. So there is the opportunity to look at that. But in regards to the bylaw, I just put in kind of blanket language that says the commission has their own filing fees and applicants are required to pay them. I've also inputted provisions for a consultant fee. David may speak to this because I hadn't talked to him about this one. But as we do now, the board is more than welcome to request applicants to pay for consultant fees as we had done for the ANRAD. So the bylaw update just incorporates that, hey, the commission may ask in certain situations where more information is warranted that an applicant pay for that for their consultant in that review. David, does
Are we
that sound
talking
about right?
George, are we talking about peer review now?
Correct.
Yeah, that's correct,
Same,
Mike.
consulting and peer is the same. And are you happy with how the language regarding peer review? I know we voted on that last year, maybe.
Yeah, that was last year, Mr. Spillane. So that provision is under state law, Massachusetts. It's a 53G is what it's commonly known as. So you voted that in place. I think what George is doing here is codifying that in the bylaw. So if you picked up, so you voted on that 53G motion, it's in place, but technically it doesn't say that anywhere in any of your books. So I think going forward, it'll at least be explicit to anybody who's coming before the commission that, yes, in fact, we do have the ability, you've read it in our book, to go out for peer review. While it's legal.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, David. I'd like to
Yep.
see it in writing. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what we're going for here, I think.
Yeah. Yep. And Mike, I can actually make sure that we specifically reference that language that the commission adopted. I'll get that from David, or we can even make reference to 53G if that's in our best interest.
Thank you.
Okay. Section 11 was just establishment of buffers and restrictions. So that isn't the actual establishing the 35 and 50. Really, it was just, again, a blanket statement saying, hey, the commission has the right and may set their own buffers and may require certain things within those areas. And then fees, I made fees a new section. It did not have its own section in the existing bylaw. I felt it important to pull it out, especially because there are a couple provisions in there. You know, the commission can waive their fees for government agencies and nonprofits as they see fit. So just adding those provisions into its own section was kind of one of the final updates. Any questions there?
Just a comment on the buffers. David might know this. At what point does it get to be arbitrary? I mean, we're going from 35 to 50, and I'm happy about that. Does that mean we could say, well, let's make it 75? I mean, at some point, is it arbitrary? And it has to be based on some, I would say, some finding or some belief that as Georgia relayed, that the impact at 50 is almost the same as the impact at 5. So my question is, could someone say it's arbitrary at 50, or but maybe at 75 they could?
Yeah, Mr. Spillane, I think that's a valid question in terms of the arbitrary nature of it. A lot of communities, as Georgia indicated, use 50 now. I think for Danvers, given its settlement patterns and the way things are laid out, going beyond that would be really difficult. The amount of reviews you would see would increase probably exponentially. Right. Like the entire Woodville neighborhood would have.
David, would you have to put language in to justify or you just make it 50?
Well, we could just make it 50. However, I do think you are absolutely correct. We should probably pull language out of the Tewksbury report to say explicitly what we're trying to do with cleanliness of runoff and stormwater with regard to the 50-foot buffer.
Yeah. I think so too.
That's a great comment.
Yeah, great idea. Okay. All right, so I'll add that. And then just an recap of where we're going for our meetings coming up. So on the 24th and on the 8th are our next scheduled meetings to continue discussion. So I have on here that we'll continue the bylaw review, and I will add those updates and comments from you guys tonight. And if there's anything else you want to add, feel free to put it right in the document that's in the packet, or you can also just email me and call me. And then we'll also be providing some of the regulation updates to give more context to what we've been talking about. And just quickly, I'd spoken to Peter about this, but we'll also be adding language in the packet for our cluster bylaw that the planning department is reviewing. Sorry, the planning board is reviewing, and that they'll be bringing as a zoning change to town meeting. David and I have been working on updating the cluster bylaw language, and we are actually proposing to rename it the Residential Conservation Development. So getting the Conservation Commission's feedback and input is really important to us. So I'll be giving a brief pitch on that to the commission for some feedback. So look for that in the packet if you read it, or if you read it and you have no idea what's going on, have a ton of questions, we're happy to answer those too. So, and if your head is spinning because there's just so much information, don't worry. I can do this whole PowerPoint again right now if you want me to, but I will not. So I'm going to stop sharing that. So I'll leave it back to you, Mr. Chairman. I am all set.
Right. I think the next matter is adjournment. Does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Oh wait, no. Mike, there's one more, 28 Harbor Street. I just wanted to announce that so the group of citizens have appealed the order of conditions at 28 Harbor Street that the commission issued. They appealed that on the basis of insufficient protection provided for the bank in the order. So they're saying the order did not take measures to kind of protect the stability of the bank. The DEP has accepted that appeal. That does not mean they've issued a decision on anything. They've basically saying, we'll take a look. So in that first process, they're going to be doing a site visit on Monday, September 14th at 1 p.m. That's strictly limited just to the commission and the applicant, and only because the DEP's put a lot of guidelines due to COVID. So this is important. It's limited to 10 people. So if there's any commission members that would like to go, please let me know as soon as possible. And you are also required to fill out a quick COVID release form, and you need to email that to the DEP representative by tomorrow night. Again, a little strict of a process. It sounds like a lot, but it's really not. So if you are interested in going, just please email me, and I'll get you set up with the DEP coordinator. I will be on the site visit there, and Kyle Lally from the DEP will be there as well. That's about as much information I've gotten so far in correspondence with the case, but I'll keep everyone updated as things move forward.
All right, is that it, Georgia?
You can adjourn. And great job today, Mike.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
All right, motion's been made by Peter Wilson to adjourn. Do we have a second?
This is Ann. I'll second that motion.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Do we need to do a roll call on that?
Yes, just to be safe, please.
All right. All in favor. Vanessa, Karen?
Yes.
Okay. Michael Spillane, yes. Ann McGill?
Yes.
Ann McGill?
Yes.
Is Ann there?
Yep.
You hear?
Hello.
Ann's there.
Ann McGill?
Yes.
I don't hear Ann.
She said yes, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Chelsea King?
Yes.
Yes. Peter Wilson?
Yes.
What a delay. All right, and Peter Wilson? Peter?
Yes, Mike.
All right, that's motions allowed. And we are adjourned. I guess I'll say good night, everyone.
All right.
Good night. Good night,
Good
all.
job, everybody.
Bye.
Great job.
Happy birthday, Alicia.
Thank you.
See ya.
Hi, Alicia.
Good job, everyone.
Great job,
Thank you.
Alicia.
Thanks.
All right.